Hello and welcome to the Juggling podcast, episode number 65, I guess.
Oh, wow.
We're into our
65.
fifth season. Fifth season. We're in our fifth season. I'll explain my seasons later. My name is Luke Burridge, and welcome to a chat about juggling topics. Joining me, like always, is Juliana.
Hello, everyone.
And what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about coaching, juggling coaching.
Yeah.
Is there such a thing as a juggling coach? All that
the question.
kind of stuff. Well, okay, my theory is seasons every season lasts twice as long because there's like a doubling effect with podcasts. Most podcasts last one episode. A few podcasts last 2 episodes. Even fewer last 4. It's like this half-life, if you know what I mean.
Right.
8 podcasts, you're like, oh, that's a few months in a row. That's like someone's put in, or if it's a monthly podcast or a weekly podcast, that's like 2 months worth of podcasts, you know.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, that's really good. And then, of course, 16, 32, 32 podcasts.
I think that 10 is sometimes like the cutoff point.
Yeah, because people go, oh, I'll get to 10 and you're feeling good about it. But like how many other juggling podcasts stop like episode 3 because they've interviewed the 3 jugglers that they know well enough to ask for an interview? And it's a real tricky thing. So we're on episode 65, which means we're in our season 5, and season 5 lasts twice as long as the 64 episodes of before. So when we get to 128, we're really getting in there. I think I mentioned this on the Science Fiction Book Review podcast, which is our other podcast that we record more episodes of than
many more.
We got to episode 512, and I'm like, we've made it, episode 512, because that is again another power of 2. Getting to 500 episodes, getting to 1,000 episodes, then you're like, all right, we've been doing this 10 years now, or whatever is a weekly podcast, 10 years, 500 and something episodes.
Still very impressive. Like, I never look at these numbers, but then I'm always surprised by how long we've been doing this now.
Well, I want to thank some of our, I'm going to thank all of our top Patreon supporters here. We thank everybody by name who supports us at any level above like $1 or €1 or £1 or whatever it is.
Yes.
So a big thank you at the moment to our top people who are Andreas and Marshall and Sid.
Thank you.
So that's it. So if you actually support us at the top level, it's called a clean finish, 25 euros or $25 a month. You get to pick a topic. And then other people, thank you very much to Bethany, Callie, Chris, Danny, Flo, Hendrik, Joel, Matt, Jeremy, Joe, Yuli, Juliana. That's you. Thank you very much. You still support me.
Yeah, you still do.
Kathy, Keith, Mark, Michael, Rafa, Robert, Statist, the mysterious Mark, Adam. Oh no, I'm not thanking Adam because he's only supporting us.
We
for the one
also thank Adam.
Well, thank you so much to all our patrons.
It's a great support.
Yeah,
great
just
help.
a few $100s, a few €100 per month makes a huge impact. At the moment, you are supplying me with 3D printer filament to keep printing. To keep printing stuff for my Flash 30 juggling project.
Yeah.
And other people are supporting Fight Night Combat specifically, and so thank you very much to all of our supporters.
And maybe also paying for the training space that you go to, the training spaces, that also
I like to think that's kind of a professional expense as well. But yes, every little helps at the moment, especially as I'm kind of in my off-season training block at the moment. Flash 30 project going really well.
Yeah.
The idea was to flash 8 clubs and 10 rings and 12 balls. Turns out 8 clubs, pretty easy. Not pretty easy, actually very difficult. But I knew that if I actually trained, got the right equipment, I'd be able to get it. Same with 10 rings. The first time I tried this, I should get it. And I did. I kind of got them both within 1 to 2 training sessions as I started actually trying them for the first time. Turns out 12 balls, much more difficult.
Yeah, well,
fancy that.
It's no surprise, is it? Like
no,
it's the prop
like
with the most props, and
honestly, 12 balls
hard.
is an order of magnitude harder than 8 clubs and 10 rings.
Yeah.
So I'm still working on it.
And we're gonna do another specific topical podcast
at the moment,
about that
it's
project.
Purely an Instagram/YouTube Shorts project and some deep dive videos on YouTube.
Yeah.
So if you've not been following along, I will actually combine all of the videos that I've made so far. I'm going to combine them into like one long 20-30 minute video, so you could just press play and watch them all back to back. So that'll be a future project once I flash 12 balls for the first time. But I've got some other little clips, other little videos that I want to do talking about the pattern that I'm using for 12 balls. Someone asked about that. And it's been good so far. And also I've got maybe an opportunity to perform or do the talk, when I'm talking in that project, when I say I want to do a talk or a presentation, where I show some clips and let people hold the props, comparing these are the traditional handles and the traditional weight of clubs, and now here's what I've done, and people can, I can pass them around the audience. People can go, oh, these are much like, actually make it interactive and stuff. So that's fun. An idea. I'll maybe have an opportunity to do that later on in the year.
Oh, nice.
Let's get on to, though, today's topic.
Yes. And it kind of fits, like, tangentially.
Well, it could fit to any topic, like coaching.
But right now, it's actually
We're going to talk about coaching.
Yes.
Future Luke here. I don't normally edit the podcast, but I thought I'd edit this to add this note where we talked for quite a while without actually me saying what the point of the podcast is. And that is, even though professional coaches aren't generally available for any juggler, there are lots of things that we can learn from looking at what coaches do in other sports, in other activities, and how you can, by looking at what other coaches do in other fields and activities, how you can get some benefits from what coaches will give without actually having to pay a professional coach yourself. So hopefully that makes sense, and let's get on with the episode. So this started off in my head I've thought about this topic on and off over the years. For many years, I've thought about this, coaching and things.
And we talked about it a lot
and we've talked about coaching as well. But then I was juggling at Catacomb, and Bo asked me, top 40 juggler Bo, top 10, I can't remember. Anyway, Bo, everyone knows Bo.
Yeah.
He does poi. Anyway, he's a
great
coach.
Juggler.
He teaches people how to do. I think he's also a support. He's a Patreon supporter as well.
Oh, nice!
Awesome.
So
anyway, Bo is a coach, so he has students.
Yes.
Some people he coaches via Skype or FaceTime or whatever it is. Other people come along, and he does one-on-one sessions with them. And also he does workshops as well. He's got a workshop coming, like a 3-day intensive workshop at the end of the month.
Yes.
Or next month, either way.
At the end of the month.
Anyway, he asked me, who is the best juggling coach of all time?
Ooh.
And there is an obvious answer.
Yes.
And it's Nick Gatto, because the greatest juggler of all time is coached by this guy.
Yeah.
And without Nick Gatto, Anthony Gatto would be nothing. But I'm going to get into that later in a bit more. But generally what I said is that it's difficult to judge other coaches and how effective they are because, and this is my overall thesis, this is my overall theory, this is my overall statement about juggling and improving juggling, or to become a good juggler. Really, the most important thing is spending time in a place where there's a high ceiling when you're the right age. And it's really annoying that is the key. That is one of the key things, is that when you're between the ages of, say, I'd say when you're going through, like, when you're becoming an adult, especially for guys, when they're getting that, like, growth spurt and their body oils are all changing, they're going through puberty, they're becoming it, like, they're going through teenage years, all that kind of stuff. If you spend a lot of time juggling from the age of 13 to 18, with a high ceiling, and your main thing is juggling, there is almost nothing outside of that anybody can do to become a better juggler than you, or that you can do later in life to become a better juggler than you were then.
Yes.
I'm saying that very broadly, very, very generally. But that is the time when you need to be putting in the time and effort into accumulating skills to get your baseline of skills and your baseline of abilities up high enough that from then on, every time that you're training something, you can be training at a high enough level that it's actually helping.
Yeah.
There are innumerable people that I've met who have learned to juggle 5 balls when they're in their 30s.
Yeah.
And their pattern never gets past the pretty good at 5 balls. I've met loads of people who've tried to learn clubs when they're in their 30s or 40s, and it always gets to the point that their skills, it's almost impossible to get the skill level up to when you can actually be comfortable enough that you can learn new tricks with, say, 5 clubs or whatever.
Yeah, because it's one of those things that I also observed, like, I am in nowhere near a juggler, and but I don't train, I don't do any practicing, but I have, have had in the past some weird aspirations of, I want to do this or that, which were always outside of my capabilities. And what I observed is that it always feels like, it's just one more object.
Yeah.
However, the curve is definitely exponential. So that means that if you are at 3 balls, that's a certain level of fitness, a skill, your body can sustain. And then going one further up will take just a bit more.
Yeah, but if you get up to that level, it's easier to sustain a level.
Yes.
And to slowly improve over your adult life. Like, people, it always happens, they get good and they're 18 years old and then they leave school or college and they go to university and they're doing well, and they can keep juggling through university, and then they leave and then they've got to get a real job.
Yes.
And they're no longer world-class numbers jugglers anymore unless that's going to be the only thing that they do.
Yeah. And then once you're at this 5 object level, it might be clubs or balls, you have like the length of times that you will have to be really good at that, and have that level to then be able to go up one more. That is like 5 times the amount of strength,
and the time
endurance,
that you have
and time.
The time that you have, the period in your life where you have the time to go through these exponentially more difficult steps is when you're a teenager. And so the jugglers,
young adult.
The young adults. So the jugglers who have access to a good training space and the time to be able to do that, those are the people who really rock it through. So people like, I don't know, like a Wes Peden, a Delaney Bayliss, I'm talking about people who are now, like high-level technical jugglers on stage, etc.
Yes,
so anyway, everything else that we're going to talk about has to be viewed now in the context of, is the coach or is the trainer or is the person giving advice and helping this person, how much are they improving the juggler's performance above and beyond what they would have improved anyway if they just had a lot of time with in a nice pleasant hall with a high ceiling and no expectations to do anything
at the right time and age in their life.
So let's go through some of these things.
Yes.
Well, no, actually, let me just elaborate more on that point before I get to all the things how a coach can help.
Yeah.
Because, again, I don't want to be down on this topic or anything, but I don't think we can ever find out how much a juggling coach improves a juggler, because there's very few of these like natural experiments where we see someone who has been coached from a young enough age without any bias.
Yes.
Anthony Gatto is like it, maybe Wes Peden, because he was learned to juggle quite young, and his father, Jeff Peden, was teaching him, from a young age as well. So those are the kind of natural experiments that we have.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. In every other sport, or put it this way, in every sport where there's professional coaches, there is also professional sports people.
Yeah.
And those professional sports people have to bring in enough income, or there has to be a structure in place that there has to be like a way for coaches to be paid.
Yeah.
For them to become professional coaches.
Yeah.
Then there to be enough coaches that you can decide if someone is a good coach or not a good coach. And there's quite a lot of steps that you've got to get to.
Yes.
Here's the thing. In the world of, say, football, soccer, American football, all these big team sports, ice hockey, whatever the sports are, baseball, basketball, there's enough money in those sports that a coach can make their name and people can recognize, that person's a good coach, that person's not a good coach. But we don't really see that very much until they get to like the highest level, when you're at like the football manager kind of level.
Yeah.
But below that, for every football team, there's like the manager, and then there could be like 10 coaches. There'll be a coach just for people taking free kicks. There'll be another coach just for the goalkeepers. They'll have 3 goalkeepers on a team, plus 1 coach who's just there to help the goalkeepers.
Yeah. And then, and additionally to that system comes literally a development system below that. So
for the coaches,
you have like juniors teams, like you have local community teams. They all have coaches.
Yeah,
and
they all need coaches.
They all need coaches and want coaches. So if you, as a person, get into that kind of system, and then you make your way up the coaching ladder. It's like the similar kind of, like the football players themselves. You go up the different leagues, and there's a
whole industry of professional team sports.
Yeah.
And there's more people in the coaching team than there is on the field. I'm sure. Again, maybe not for American football because they have like 50 players out there. I don't even know how I don't know how they do it. But again, there's huge amounts of money in there.
Yeah.
And also at the college level, for a long time, the players weren't paid very much, but the coaches at these colleges, like they were the big. That was where you were spending the money. You're spending the money on the coaches, and things. So So yeah, all of that is super important. Tennis is a much more individual sport. Yeah. There are some tennis teams, doubles players and things, and there's also national teams. And that's the two different ways. National federations will have coaches that are employed by the national federation.
Yeah.
So you'll have coaches who just work with British players. You'll have coaches which just work with French players. You'll have coaches who are like the Italian national coach, and they can be coaching the Davis Cup team or the Billie Jean King Cup team or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But then a lot of tennis players, I'd say most tennis players, I'd say all professional tennis players in the top 100 men, top 100 women, probably have a coach who is either part-time or full-time.
Yes.
Some of them will have numerous coaches. They'll have some coaches who will be traveling
different sections, different places, different things.
There'll be a coach who just does the skill training and, hitting partner kind of duties, and then they'll have maybe like a super coach. They'll bring in like Andy Murray is now coaching Djokovic, which is just insane, that can even be a thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can bring on the super coach, and you can bring on your skills coach and your whatever kind of stuff. So that's like another kind of thing. But those top coaches are paid by like taking a percentage of the player. So the player is like the corporation. The player is like, like the team, like in team sports.
Yeah.
They are the team, and they have to earn enough money so each player can have 1, 2, 3 full-time professional coaches.
Yeah.
And some of them even have mental coaches or, people who go around who just do the physiotherapy. People who have full-time physiotherapists, a full-time tennis coach, a full-time, like, a hitting partner, a full-time mental coach, like Iga Swiatek has, like, their, mental coach that they pay money, maybe doesn't travel with them all the time, but to the big tournaments, they'll be there.
Absolutely.
But the thing is, in these sports, in all these sports I'm talking about, there's an insane amount of money available for the athletes and for the teams, and so using the coaches is very important. With juggling, that's not the case.
Yeah.
There aren't any professional coaches except people who are doing very specific skills, and these very specific skills, there's maybe 4 or 5 of these people in the world who are good enough at their skill to be able to ask for payment for people to make it worth their while becoming a coach.
Yeah. And for people to willing to spend, like it's a huge investment at that stage.
And Bo is one of those people. Like he is at a high enough level that he doesn't want to perform for a living. He wants to do coaching. So in other words, he wants to make videos and teaching videos and do
workshops.
One-on-one coach-ups and one-on-one workshops and master classes and all this kind of stuff, which is fantastic. And it's working out for him, pretty much working out for him.
Nice.
There's other people who do like the juggling coaching. Was it Larry Koskinen? Yeah. I've seen Katrin, the one, Nikki whatever she is, bouncing. I see that she does coaching as well, and she has individual students that she does that. That's one way, but that's like a one-on-one. There's no intermediary. The other way of coaching happens is with circus schools.
Yes.
So, for example, the coach at, at the Lido. But they're also not just coaching. They're not just doing skills coaching. They're often like doing teaching and doing other stuff as well. But they're paid for by the circus school, which will have funding from the state or will have funding from the students, and all of that gets pulled together. Yeah. And that person will be coaching and, doing skills training and coaching with more than one juggler. Yeah. And also they have a secure period of time that they'll work with the juggler. So the juggler will arrive and they'll have 2 years, 3 years, 4 years at the doing training at the circus school, and then they'll move on. But at the time, then there's an overlap with another person who comes along.
Yes.
And is trained.
And that kind of prohibits like really long-term development. Because
no, I'm not so sure, actually.
Let me just finish what I'm trying to say here, okay? So what I'm saying is that there's always like a turnover of things, of students. And if you start off, like, for example, like, other people with a one-on-one, you can develop that much longer, much deeper than going to a school for a certain thing. And I'm saying that because I went through this like directly in another field, and so there's a shorter, more intense time that you have access to certain like school teachers, like if you go to a circus school. And then generally what happens, you leave that. Yeah. And then the teacher stays behind.
Yeah.
They don't follow you further
But again,
than that.
I understood what you were saying. I also disagree because you can see with the coach from the Kiev school.
Yeah.
Is it Yuri Poznikov or something? Poznikov?
I thought you made yourself some notes for.
I did, but
exactly
I didn't write down
reason.
I didn't write down the name of every single person here.
Why not? That's the topic of this.
Anyway, Yuri Poznikov.
Yeah.
He is obviously training people who are now professional jugglers who aren't at the school anymore.
Okay.
And who are out going around and, winning prizes here and there and performing here and having long-term contracts. But he's still coaching them.
Okay.
For example, who is it who did 13 rings there? Damn it. Well, I should have made some notes.
Daniel Lysenko.
Daniel Lysenko is still, when he's getting that 13 rings, his girlfriend or wife is next to him, but he doesn't go and celebrate with his girlfriend and wife in person. He goes over to his phone or his laptop and he says thank you to his coach who's watching his lesson.
Okay,
Not in person, but is still there.
Okay,
and I'm sure that
nice.
happens with other of these circus school people.
Right.
Like when somebody leaves like the Stockholm school, they're still going to be hanging out with like Jay Gilligan or whoever's doing the training there or whoever's doing the coaching there and things like that. So in the end, this is the only way, and like I said before, the only other way that you can have a professional coaching relationship is either if the money is going directly from the juggler to the coach, or if the money is going from the juggler to the circus school, and then that's being supplemented by other funding and other people at the circus school, and then that goes towards the coach.
Yes.
And then the final way is if it's the parent, and we've mentioned this before as well, that the coaching relationship is it could be a professional coaching relationship, but there's no expectation that the person is paying for it because it's like parenting duties are all wrapped up in that. And while I'm sure some of these, there will be money available at some point, it's generally considered parenting rather than professional coaching, even if they're coaching at a professional level.
Yeah.
In all of these cases, the coach is kind of, partly they can decide who they're coaching. And that's one of the things where it's difficult to say, is Yuri Poznikov a Rushnikov? No, they're a different one. Either way, whoever it is, should probably have looked up the names here as well. I'm so sorry. Either way, whatever these Kiev coach, the coach at the Kiev, like he is choosing, like he gets to say which jugglers come to the circus school.
Yeah.
So the people he's coaching are obviously people who are already good enough jugglers to get into the Kiev school, which is sort of like an entire nation's worth of jugglers.
Yeah.
And what you want to do is get to that Kiev school.
Yeah, after the entrance exams.
Yes, and you need to get through the entrance exams. You need to be good enough at juggling to impress someone enough that they can then say, I want to be a coach. So then you get this thing like, is the person a good enough juggler because they've already put in that time when they were a teenager?
Yeah.
Like, when is the best time to be coaching somebody? Is it when they finish school and then they're already 15, 16, 17 years old, and now as their higher education or further education, they're going to circus school?
Yeah.
It might already be too late to make them into the next greatest juggler in the world. I'm not saying it is too late. I'm saying it might be too late.
Yeah.
It's this weird thing of like coaches picking who they want to play with, and that's the super coach thing in tennis.
Yes.
If you're the super coach, if you're literally Boris Becker, if you're Ivan Lendl, who are you going to be accepting that you're going to coach them?
Yeah.
It's going to be Djokovic. It's going to be Murray.
Yeah. It's going to be the people who already bring in a high level by themselves, where you just put the icing on. Yeah. Like where you have little bits of input that will have an impact. Yeah. But the level of that person is already high. Yeah. And so, yes, that is very much of like, there's the super coach that puts the icing on. They are not doing groundwork. Yes. Like they're not doing generally.
Yeah, because it's the teachers at the tennis academies, at the various tennis academies and national federations and stuff like that. They're laying all the groundwork of like how to hold the racket, how to do the footwork.
And here's something that's really interesting from my perspective as a coach as well, unless you want to have like somebody's not doing well and they are coming to you because they're saying, I lost a bit, I don't know how to progress. Then it sometimes happens that you might need as a coach to take back all the previous basic training and literally retrain the basic stuff.
You can't do that. You can't do that with tennis, and you can't do that with juggling, because the skills that you have that you've built up when you were a teenager or in the earlier stages of your juggling, those are baked in.
Okay.
Like it's very, 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 very difficult for someone who's got those skills baked in at that level to change the kind of tennis player they are, or they change the kind of juggler they are. It can happen.
Yeah.
It has happened, but it is so incredibly rare that it is only the very top people who like stand out as the exceptions at those things.
Yeah.
So let's move on to this next stage. Talking about jugglers do not have a funding method. There is no funding method for a juggler to have a full-time coach.
Yeah.
Unless they're the best juggler in the world.
Or they work like for like circus, like Cirque du Soleil or something. Maybe
they could be there, but they'll probably have at Cirque du Soleil, they probably won't have a coach for the jugglers unless they are one of like the Diablo troops who come over from China, and they also send over someone with the Chinese juggling, the Diablo troop, or unicycle troop or whatever it is, and they will also have a national coach with them.
Yes.
And it all gets paid for.
Yeah.
But most jugglers aren't performing for Cirque du Soleil.
Yeah.
Most jugglers are just like individual people. And if they're performing with other jugglers, they're part of Jonglissimo, or they're part of the Seven Fingers, or they're part of the Gandinis and things like that. So it's everything that we've been talking about so far is so foreign to jugglers because there just isn't enough money to support a scene of coaches for any juggling coach. There's probably 20 people in the world who are earning a living by teaching people, I wouldn't say teaching people, but coaching other jugglers.
Yeah.
Like very, 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 very few in the world. There's lots of people doing juggling workshops. There's lots of people teaching people, like young people or other people, how to juggle. But again, it's like 10 people at different circus schools, which employ professional, specific juggling teachers.
Yeah.
And then 10 other people in the world.
Yes.
And then some people's parents, some parents of good jugglers.
Yeah.
And so it's almost impossible for there to become, for juggling coaches to become a thing unless all of juggling is 20 times as large as it is, or 100 times as large as it is, with 100 times as much money.
Yeah.
And there just isn't that amount of juggling. There isn't an amount of money. Like juggling is so unique that we have an emoji. Like in the, you want to send an emoji of a juggler. Very few things have an emoji.
Yes.
But juggling does.
Yes.
And I would say of almost or everything that has an emoji, juggling out of all of those is the one with the least amount of money, the least, like the fewest, institutions, the fewest competitions, the fewest of everything. There's just you take the next kind of activity which has an emoji, there's probably 10 times as much money in that industry as juggling.
Yeah. And I think what I see, like there is, I just now can just talk about Germany here now. I know that there's there is a certain amount of youth circus institutions who are also there. They employ youth circus trainers, coaches, and stuff like that. But that is being seen as a broad hobby thing.
Yeah, that's
right?
what I'm saying. Those people are teaching people about juggling, teaching people how to juggle.
Yeah.
But they're not saying, okay, now you're a professional juggler, or you're at the level of being a professional juggler. How do I bump up your level? And that's what you get at circus schools. It's like someone coming in intending to be a professional juggler. But I was just talking to Jochen, a friend of ours in Berlin, and he was like, oh yeah, I was going to sign up because he was part of like some Kabawazi circus or some, these youth circus things. He was like, no, in Berlin, there's like a 2-year-long waiting list for every one of these Kabawazis. And there's like 8 Kabawazi circuses in Berlin.
Yeah.
So like the circus skills, the circus clubs, these things, it's very, very popular, especially in Germany, up until the kids are 15, 16 years old.
Yeah.
And they discover girls and boys and drinking and college and all these other kind of stuff. So let's now talk, keeping all of this in mind, that jugglers very rarely get to pick their coach.
Yeah.
And picking their coach is generally considered, I'll pay this person or I'm going to go to their circus school. The people who don't get to pick their coaches are the ones whose coaches are, mother or father or uncle or whoever it is, stepfather. But yeah, so it's either family or you got to decide to go to a circus school.
Yes.
And the other coaches, when I say family, could be girlfriend, boyfriend, wife, husband. That also happens.
That happens, yes.
That happens as well.
Yeah.
So what does a coach do? Now, I've really enjoyed listening to some episodes of the tennis podcast where they're going in depth about coaching.
Yeah.
They had a whole episode where they talk about coaching and they talk to players about what they want from a coach, and they talk to some coaches about what they provide for the player. And it is one of those interesting things, and that kind of informs things that I've said already, is that a lot of what you see coaches doing is sitting in the box beside the tennis court. And you're like, well, why? They're not telling people, they're not helping with the tactics. Because in football, they're like giving tactics all the time. Within these team sports, they're actually someone helping with the coordination of tactics.
Yeah,
they're making
like
decisions.
The conductor.
they're making decisions who is on the field, where that person is on their field. Who goes up against this person, all that kind of stuff. Whereas on a one-on-one sport, it's not like that. And they said that there's coaching from the stands, or like having your coach tell you stuff used to be like against the rules in tennis, and now it's fine. And they're like, oh, okay.
During the matches.
During the match. The various times you could have someone come down like between the sets and talk to the players or whatever. But now this is like, they can just shout things from the coaching seats, from the players box. And people are like, oh, well, it's probably bad. Tennis should be like one-on-one. It shouldn't be a team sport when two individuals are out there. If someone's in a hole and they can't work out the tactics, that's up to them to have worked out the tactics. Or beforehand or during. It's up to them.
That before.
It's up to them to sort it out. But at least, people said, now we'll mic up the coaches or have microphones there, and we'll be able to hear what the coaches are saying over to the players, and it'll be really helpful, and it'll be a great insight. And the conclusion that I've noticed, and also just listening to these podcasts from the tennis podcast, that they've noticed is, no, none of that. You don't hear any tactics. You don't hear anything. Maybe they'll say, oh yeah, stand a bit further forward. And that's it. That's the entire coaching that we see from coaching wise.
And now I can tell you why.
Why?
Because if you are in the moment of when you need to perform the thing in a match or on stage or whatever, it is too late to do any of the coaching. What the person, the performer, the player, whoever needs at that point is just encouragement. And just saying,
and that's what the players are saying.
Go, keep doing it. Do. That is all that they need at that moment.
They need affirmation.
All that's happening before the coaching, the training, everything has to have happened before. You can't change anything in that moment. It's just too late.
So what I realize, what I want this podcast to be for the next half hour, as we're talking through this, is maybe I should have said this at the start, but I'm not going to go back and edit it because we don't edit these podcasts. What I think we should do is talk through all the things that coaches do in sports and in other areas where coaches are good. And then how can you yourself as a juggler learn, like, get the benefits of having a coach, but without having to pay 10% of your income to a coach?
Yes.
And that wouldn't even support them as a professional either. You know? And that's why family members coaching you is really handy, because you don't have to pay them 10% of your income. Or whatever. So, that kind of thing is like making a plan. And this is what the players said and the coaches said, is like, our job is to do that work and look at the other player and come up with a game plan and put it in place. But then, during that, it's about vibes, it's about encouragements, it's about affirmations, about saying that they're doing a good job. And that's kind of really boring from a spectator point of view, and really boring from like a nerdy sports fan like I am. Is like, but just...
you don't get to hear any of the background stuff.
There is, and this is what I often get kind of, not annoyed about, but I can get disappointed about when I see people performing on stage. And I realize that nobody's coached them to say, no, you can't do any of these tricks. And it's fine if people are just up there on an open stage and they want to show off what they're working on. But when people get to the level when they're being taught at circus schools or whatever, it's much more about playing it safe, not dropping, and doing working within yourself. And that's what the coach is there to do, is to say that trick is not ready. And then because when you actually get on stage, and I see this when I was organizing open stages, and people would be running through their acts and they wouldn't be able to get 3 tricks into their act without dropping. And I'm like, oh, it's not ready. And then it's like then I realized, this person isn't testing the lights on stage. They're not queuing up the music. They're not testing out the stage to see what's happening. Now they're practicing.
Yeah.
And that's something that's kind of like something that I put my foot down with when I started organizing open stages at the EJC. And I opened like every open stage at an EJC for like 4 or 5 years in a row. And we were starting on time. And the reason we were starting those shows on time when nobody else has managed to start shows on time is that the tech setup was for tech setup, and it was not for someone to practice on stage.
Absolutely. Two different things.
It's two different things.
Yeah.
And that's what a coach can tell you, is they can tell you when you're ready to do something.
Yeah.
Is they set out a plan, or you help set out a plan beforehand of how to execute on stage or on the court or on the field or whatever it is. But in terms of tennis, it's sort of like, and then when it actually gets there, everything should be ready.
Yeah.
Now, you can lose the match, win the match, you can do well at the gig, you can do badly at the gig, but at that time, you're past time for making plans and improving when you're actually in the heat of it, when you're on stage and performing or whatever.
You're going to be worse on stage.
I mean, that's talking from a professional performing point of view. From a technical point of view, there's a lot more. So let's now switch over. Let's get away from the actual performance point, because, again, it's too late for coaching then.
Yeah.
At that point, you're just giving encouragement. You're just giving high fives. You're giving thumbs up from the audience or thumbs up from the sidelines. So let's go through some of the things that a great coach will do.
Yeah.
Tactics, we can talk about that. Individual skills, great. A coach will be able to give individual skills, but by the time you're being a professional, individual skills like, turn your hands this way a bit, like do this kind of technique, throw slightly narrower, throw slightly wider. At that point, you are just affirming things that the juggler already knows.
Or that they might not like that they might have had inside them, and then in that moment they do something slightly weird and different, and from the outside you can see that. From the inside they can't always know what's happening. So then you sitting there saying, okay, move slightly to your right every time you do this. That can already help them. That's like the icing. That's what I'm talking about with the icing. You know.
So let's talk about a guy who I once lived with for a few months when I was doing acrobatics training in Sheffield. Dave and Liz were the couple that I stayed with.
Yeah.
And he was a good juggler. He was also a very good like kite surfer and BMX. He was one of these people who like everything that he did, he got like really good at and stuff. But also what they did is they had a dog and they did dog agility. They were dog trainers.
Okay.
And which meant that they had treats for the dogs.
Yeah.
And each time they give a dog a treat, they'd also give it a click.
Yeah.
And then you get the Pavlovian response that when they hear the bell ring, they think they're getting a treat. And in the end, they just associate the clicking noise. It's a little clicky thing, just a little machine clicking. Yeah. They associate that with good job. You're doing the right thing. And if the dog doesn't hear a click for a while, they look around and like, what am I doing wrong that I'm not getting clicks? And then they'll change something and you just keep clicking. It's all about the clicking. And he told me that he was teaching someone to juggle once and he had this clicker on him. I was like, oh no, I'll try and do this. And he says it worked. It turns out you didn't need to keep saying well done, well done, well done. You just needed all that you needed in the end was click, click, click. Okay. Now, I have totally taken this on board with every person that I've taught to juggle and I've been in a room with, like the guys at the Wildau juggling, the people I've taught to juggle there, you, Polar, other people, that affirmation and like, yes, good, is something that I actually do maybe too much, but it really, really helps. Yeah. It really helps being as a coach to just do that. Sort of like you're not even teaching them, but if they do something good, yes. Yeah. And you can tell people, and I've done this myself, you can tell someone what they're doing wrong 1,000 times and they don't understand it. And then they'll do it correctly once and you have to be there to see them and say, yeah, that, do that again. Yeah. And they're like, I don't even know what I did. And it's like, and then they'll do it correct because they're kind of getting a feel and you're like, yes, that again. So that kind of training where you're at a level of juggling where you can't explain with like words or even video or video playback or showing anybody or demonstrating. There's nothing there to be communicated anymore except the dog clicker. Yeah.
And you need to be able to see when that happens, like when the good thing is happening, and then affirm it with then the words that you have. Yeah.
So I think that's mostly at the level of when someone gets good enough at juggling. When I was actually doing this acrobatic training, which is now like 22 years ago, what was that? 2003. Yeah. So let's say coming up to 22 years ago, I did this. The acrobatics coach that we're training with was this Brazilian guy who was also a capoeira master, I guess, or whatever, that black belt, multiple black belt, whatever it is of capoeira from Brazil. And he was also he was in the Brazilian National Circus. He was an acrobat, and he was like a trapeze artist. He was the base. He was the catcher.
Yeah.
So he was the person throwing the people. And so his main thing that he would do is at the end, he would be the last person down from the rigging because the other people would drop down onto the net and he would do a big jump and he would always get the final applause from that because he'd be the last person down dropping down onto the net and coming off. But he would do these shows and street shows, and one of the things he would do is he would do a backflip over a car. He would get like 10 people to stand in a line with their arms out, and he would do a backflip over like 10 people or 8 people in a line and things like that.
Wow.
He was a very high level. On the first day when he was coaching us, when he was like teaching us acrobatics, he say, "It is not my job to ever demonstrate what you should do. I will not be demonstrating anything. I'm not here to demonstrate anything." So it took like 2-3 weeks of training before we ever actually saw him do something. And when he did, we're like, oh shit, this is genuine. Like, this is like really high level. So again, I think that's one of those things which a coach never needs to do the thing. And even if they can do the thing, they shouldn't. There should be no need to ever demonstrate that they can do the thing. This is really easy in tennis and other sport. That's why you get the super coach in. That's why Ivan Lendl comes in, who had won like 7 Grand Slams or 5 Grand Slams or whatever, and Andy Murray hasn't. Yeah. And he brings him in, and suddenly they're like, oh, right, this is a good one. Yeah. But once Andy Murray won his first Grand Slam, you're like, all right, what does Ivan Lendl do anymore? I mean, he helps a bit more, but then he needed to become world number 1. He needed someone who was like a top clay court player to get him over the line. He got Amelie Marismo in to come and be a clay court specialist and help him. And that's, with these different coaches, these different super coaches, these different big name other tennis players, he'd take a bit from here and a bit from there, which can really help. Jugglers, I don't think there's many jugglers who can help people in many different ways. Like even the great juggling coaches, like a Nick Gatto helping Anthony Gatto, he could teach him technical skill, but not very much about performance. It was only Anthony Gatto had to learn how to be a performer by himself. Yeah. You can see what Nick Gatto thought was good at performing by his very earliest stuff. And then, of course, you can totally see Dick Franco comes in and goes, right, here's a trick, do this. And you can see Anthony Gatto doing his Dick Franco impression. And then as time goes on, he's, he develops as a performer as well. Yeah. But so it's like he had a technical coach and also then over the years, different performing coaches, and then later on he obviously understood enough what's going on, working for Cirque du Soleil, putting these things in order.
I think there are different sections that a coach or a person that coaches you for specific things can help you with, and that is always the point of when you are actually then becoming a professional at something, you need to know what you need and what specific thing you want support with. Yeah. And then there can be different people who do that. Yeah. And for example, that what Nick Gatto did with Anthony Gatto when he was at a certain level, the picking up the props and stuff, that is a tiny bit, but it can have a huge impact. And so what also can have a huge impact in certain levels of what you need is when you don't want to sit down and write yourself a training plan. Yeah. You want somebody else, like you are outsourcing mental capacity for you to then
super important
do the thing.
Let's move on to that.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. Coming back to this tennis podcast as well, when they're talking about coaching, or one of the podcasts, I listened to 2 different podcasts where they're talking specifically to coaches or interviewing coaches or with players about this kind of stuff. Yeah. And one thing that they mentioned is that what is the coach's job? And often the coach is there to help with administration, planning, lesson planning. What is the guide so that the player can turn up and doesn't have to worry about all the small things. And I think this is a huge part of what a coach can do for someone is the juggler turns up and they know that, and again, coming back to lessons to learn from this, is when you turn up, how little thought and how little ideas and little consideration that you need to actually follow through on yourself. You say, talking about that mental energy that you've got to put in place.
Yeah.
How much of that do you have to get in before you juggling yourself and actually training the skills and improving? And this can be a lot of this comes down to, do you have a space that you can juggle in?
Yeah.
Like if you have a regular training space that you never have to worry about, like you can just leave your props there, you can turn up.
Yeah.
And if you already have an established plan of training that you're happy to do, even if you're bored of it.
Yeah.
And I think this is really important, that a coach will say, no, this is what we're working. You're like, I'm bored of that. But a coach will say, no, keep working on it. But I think if you're a juggler without a coach, which is literally every juggler in the world except like 4 or 5 people, you setting yourself a training program which you don't need to think about once you get into it, but you also enjoy doing is, and I think one of the reasons why in this Flash 30 project I've managed to like get a lot of success in it straight away is that I was like single-minded about it. Like I haven't really been running through my juggling acts. I even said I don't want something which I'm training to perform on stage. I want just a technical exercise which I think is within my grasp, but I can just, or within my reach, but I haven't grasped it yet. But then I can just train that. And so now it's got to the point where I was turning up and I was like, well, I know what I'm going to do because I haven't perfected 4 clubs in my left hand yet. So I just turn up and I know that in this training session, I want to get 4 clubs in my left hand 3 times in a row or whatever it's going to be.
Yeah.
And it's super easy. And I don't need to worry about it when I get to the training because I already know what the next step is, because I already know what the goal is. You know, I already know the goal is this.
Yeah. And you can just follow it without having in the moment to then start thinking about it. So you can become literally at that point your own coach by having established that beforehand.
But you have to stick to it.
Yes.
Because if you don't stick to it the first time it gets boring or the first time you get discouraged or it's like worthless, because then what are you even doing?
Yes.
You mentioned before about picking up props. Let's say picking up props, we're going to use that word as a proxy what am I trying to say? As a way of referring to all things that make juggling and training more pleasant, which could be any of the following. Picking up the props for the person. Again, this is super important. That's, I think, the reason why Anthony Gatto was the greatest juggler of all time, is because he never had to bend down to pick up the props off the floor if he didn't need to. I've told the story before as well. Yeah. When I was teaching Paula how to juggle clubs.
It's a huge part of it.
All I did was stand next to her and pick the clubs up off the floor and pass them to her and give them to her, which meant she got good at like taking clubs and arranging them in hand without ever the frustration of picking up. She didn't need to learn to kick up the props or flick up the props or bend down or anything like that.
It speeds up your learning, your training process by literally half, because you don't spend half the time picking up when you dropped.
And she got from not being able to juggle clubs to, again, like performing 8 clubs on stage, like performing at the EJC Gala show within like a year or whatever it was, doing loads of club juggling, being a professional juggler, being a professional level juggler. And people thought she was a much better juggler than she actually was. Like we were doing like 8 clubs, working on 9 club passing. And then I can't remember, I think we were at like the Israeli juggling convention and they were doing the games and they're like, oh, we're going to do some women's games. I'll do like 5-ball endurance for just for the women. And they're like, Paula, and she's like, no, I don't do that. She could juggle 4 clubs. She'd never learnt 4 balls or 5 balls or anything like that.
Yeah, you can train for very specific things.
She had become a pretty good
expert at that.
She had become a professional level club passer. Yeah. Learning only the tricks that she needed to do and only the skills that she needed to do to become a professional juggler, and us to be like performing at the EJC Gala and touring the world and winning juggling competitions and winning street show festival competitions by being like leaning into what she was good at, plus being supported. But either way, picking up her props. So here's what I do. So I was learning like ring tricks. And the holster that I have is a very successful holster designed for throwing, not a very good holster designed for bending down and picking up things off the floor. But more than the holster, I'm wearing gloves. And the gloves that I'm wearing mean that the rings that I'm juggling, which are thin, if I bend down and try and pick up a ring on the floor with these gloves on,
you don't have the tactility.
Can't do it. And then the shoes that I'm wearing, like the rings that I'm using, like these thinner babash rings, like my normal rings that I'd use are kind of chunky. So if I can just like use the edge of the sole of my shoe to kind of help scoop up a ring and like put it around my foot and kick it up. And so I bending down to pick up the ring. So then I was using the rings to scoop up the ring. So I was putting the ring again, like pushing against my foot and scooping up. And it's kind of really annoying to do that on all these different surfaces. And after getting a bit annoyed with that, juggling at the Catacomb and juggling at Catapult in Studio 2, where there's like a harder floor, I'm just like, I need to only juggle 10 rings, which is where I'm dropping. But like if I'm doing 8 rings, I'm not dropping very much, or I'm dropping a lot less. So I'm only picking up 1 or 2 rings if I need to. But with 10 rings, I'd fail, and I'm like, I've got to pick up 7 rings, and they're all over the place. And I didn't want to bend down, and like bending down to pick things up. But Studio 1 at Catapult has got this really like well padded dance flooring. Which means that if the ring is there and I just press down on it with my left foot, the other end of the ring kind of
there's enough give then.
There's enough give in the floor that it kind of like seesaws the other end up, levers the other end up, that I can stick my toe underneath it and then flick it up and catch it in my hand. The ceiling in there is too low to do 10 rings properly. But I'm the only person juggling in there. There's not aerialists there that I've got to worry about. There's not people walking through. There's not other jugglers in there. It's me by myself in a room where I can juggle in the right place, that when I drop the rings, they're probably going to either fall straight down or they're going to roll behind me. So I juggle close enough to the wall that when they roll behind me, they bump into the mirrors there or up against the wall. And so I can just turn around and scoop them up by like putting my foot. And it made a huge difference to my enjoyment of training 10 rings, which I found frustrating in any other place. And also the ceiling is kind of whitish grayish. So at the right time, when the light's shining through, the red and blue, the darker rings that I have are really visible. And they're thinner and lighter and easier. And the rings that I have to use in Studio 2, the white rings, they're thicker. They're 15 grams more each, which just means the throwing and catching takes more energy, and the rocket launch equations, it really goes up a lot when you're moving more weight around. But also in Studio 2, where it's got a darker ceiling, a higher ceiling, but also it's got like this aerial rigging. And so the rings the way that I'd have to line up to get the ceiling to work out, when I drop the rings, they would bounce and go behind the frame of the aerial rigging. And also, it's kind of like the sharp metal edges, and I didn't want to ding the edges of my rings because these are these are cathedral rings, which they're kind of really nice to juggle, but the plastic is a bit softer.
So they get that.
So I didn't want to ding them. So every time I would start juggling in there, I would have to use rings which were too thick, heavy, and also I would put mats along the back of this frame that when I dropped them and they rolled back there, they wouldn't hit these sharp edges of these, like this horizontal sharp edges of this frame. And I'm like, what I did was a little bit of like coaching, a little bit of self-improvement, like not technique. So I'm in a place with which the ceiling is too low. And I
less than ideal.
It's less than ideal, but what is more ideal is that I made the juggling more pleasant for myself, that I could just juggle for as long as I want and not get frustrated, because every time I dropped, it was very calm to pick everything up. The rings weren't rolling behind something. The rings weren't rolling underneath something. They weren't dropping through a hole in the floor.
And what did you do to achieve that? I missed that now. That point.
I moved into Studio 1 where there's a dance floor and nothing, no rigging, like no big bits of metal.
You changed the environment.
And changed the environment.
Okay.
And here's the thing: a coach who would be picking the rings up, I could do the rings underneath the higher ceiling, and a coach would be like, don't do this, do that. Like, look, have that outside eye, that person from the outside who is hoping for things. So I made some notes here, is like, picking up the props, make picking up props easier. Be your own Nick Gatto. Learn how to kick up a club. Learn how to kick up a ball. With the balls that I'm using, or these small balls, I drop them all. The first thing I do is I just kick them all into a pile close to where I want to do. Then I bend down and pick them all up in one go. I'm not bending down, picking up a ball. Bending down, picking up a ball. And balls, because now there's 12 balls. There's not 10 rings or 8 clubs. At that point, it's like, and also the clubs as well that I'm using I'm kicking them up. But the clubs, the handles, the profile, I've designed it so well that I can just keep picking up clubs and putting them into my left hand.
Yeah.
My left hand, they're so light that my left hand doesn't get strained holding all the clubs. But I'm generally holding 6 clubs at a time in my left hand while I'm picking up with my right hand, or kicking up or flicking up into my right hand.
Yeah.
And then I can just arrange them all, which is a big difference from when I was training 7 clubs with normal size handles with heavier clubs. Just holding onto the clubs while you're picking up is like a bit of a faff.
Yeah. Then the more objects, the more difficult it becomes.
Use gloves. You get the right lighting. Get into the right environment.
Yeah.
Everything is possible. Clean the props. Like look after the props. Make sure they're clean and nice.
Yeah.
That you're wearing nice things.
Yeah.
Buy some trainers that make you feel good. Everything that a coach would be doing for a professional athlete. And I say a coach, this could also be a mental coach. This could be a training coach. Yeah. All of those different kind of things you can do with your own juggling practice to like frame yourself as like, if I had a coach, what they'd be doing. Would they have a coaching plan for this training session? And then all of the other considerations, and make your training sessions as much like Anthony Gatto's training sessions as possible. Not by like doing the juggling he's doing, but by pretending that you have Nick Gatto there to pick up all your stuff and to tell you what to do, and to say, yes, you're ready to move on to the next thing now. Yes, you've got that point. Now move on to the next thing.
And at that point, you need to be honest with yourself, because it doesn't help you if you are kind of like smoothing over things here at that point, and an outside coach wouldn't. So you have to be honest and say, okay, did that count? Did I now actually do the 10, or did I like now just lie to myself and say, yeah, that was good enough? Like, these kind of shortcuts will take away then something you're trying to achieve here.
Yeah, you've got to be honest with yourself. Yeah. And actually, for some people, they don't need to think about any of this because they just enjoy juggling so much, or they're young enough, or whatever it is. They can just enjoy, or maybe they're not trying to improve a specific skill or trying to up their technical level.
Yeah.
But yeah, all of these things is really important. And you also got to understand what kind of coach that you want to be. Yeah. Some people need someone to shout at them or tell them to do what they need. There's these great stories, I say great, kind of really sad stories about Douglas Adams, who was a writer. He wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah.
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And then he's so commercially successful. They're like, well, you just need to keep writing. And they would there's all these stories about how they would employ someone to sit across the desk from him just to make sure he was sitting. Like the publisher would employ a writing coach whose only job was to sit there and say, where is the next page of this new book? And he would just sit there. They would just book hotel rooms and just get him to do it because he was so not naturally a novelist.
Yeah.
But the novels were so lucrative and he knew they were so lucrative, but he just needed someone there to be the taskmaster.
Yes. And this is a very important point here. There has been a time in certain cultures and certain places, there is one style of coaching.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
That is being applied to everyone, and this is not how people work. People are quite diverse and different, and that means that if you get to a coach who are literally using a coaching style that is the opposite of what you need, you knowing yourself, and sometimes as a young person that isn't easy.
Yeah, again, but this isn't for young people. You
then need to but at certain stages, you will need to know yourself, what you need, and if you need a person that is affirmative and positive and gives you positive input, good, look for this person. If you need somebody to like really like shout at you, like do the thing now again and do it, and you that was shit. You are
I wouldn't say shouting. Let's take away the shouting. Let's say being very firm with someone.
Yes.
Like, but again, you need to be. If you have a coach like that, you need to respect them. Enough that they can say that to you in that tone of voice. And some people do need that. Like some tennis players, they actually need someone to come in and say, stop messing around on court.
Yeah.
Do the just concentrate on the basics. Another people need to say, like a coach needs to come in and say, don't just do the basics, be more free on court.
Yeah.
And you can definitely see the coaches who have impact in both ways. Yeah. Again, I follow tennis, so that's what you need. So let me just say one
thing. And then you need to know if you need to be in a state where you are like kind of having to need this fire of saying like, okay, you just told me something and I need to prove you wrong.
Yeah.
I need to prove to my coach, to you, that I can do this. Some people need to get into that state, and then they need the input to be this way.
Yeah, and here's the thing, like I will make bets with people, or you make bets with yourself. Again, like not bets, or like goals, whatever it is. And that's what I think a lot of people get from Instagram now, is that they get that affirmation that yes, you can do it. I set myself a challenge to do this, and other people keep them honest as they go through their Instagram challenge or whatever it's going to be. So
and that can happen with a friendly rivalry if you have a community.
Yeah, the
like
community
you're outsourcing
can help.
that again.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say is like, what do you need? Do you need someone who's stern with you? You can't get that from the community because nobody is going to tell you to do something.
Yeah.
Although I would like to tell some jugglers to stop doing things. Lauga, stop hitting yourself on the head with rings. It's dumb, and you're encouraging other people to do dumb shit. Otherwise, I don't really have any negative feedback for anyone except Lauga, who's like thinks it's fun to hurt himself. Yeah. Stop doing that, Lauga.
But generally, a community is generally going to be affirmative and
they're going to be positive about it. So, but it's really funny. I was watching the Formula One this morning because I woke up early and I was like, all right, let's just get up and start watching it. And there was some delay because someone crashed or whatever. But it's really fun because they play the radio messages of people going around the track in the rain. And there's Lewis Hamilton. He's got a new coach. Right? They don't call him coaches. It's like his race engineer. Yeah. And the race engineer is like, right, yes, use this, press the K1 button. And he's like, no, I've got it. I'll use it when I need it. And he's sort of like, gonna do this. And he's like, no, I'm good. Like, I'm like, just, okay, that's too much. And Carlos Sainz also, because he's moved to a different team and he's all like, no, it's too much. You stop talking to me. No, I've got this. Just let me do it. And like these people who are now with a new team and with a new coach.
They first need to put together what is actually
and
needed,
when
what is too much.
We're watching the Drive to Survive from this year as well, and you were saying they just keep saying push. I'm like, yes, they're not saying just do better. They're giving them coaching to say this is it's like that dog clicker thing. Like when you say push, it's not like instructions. It's like now is the time. It's like hammer time. It's like whatever it's going to be.
Yeah.
And you can see these drivers who are in these new teams. They're like, no, this is too much. You're talking to me while I'm going down the straight, and then I'm getting to the corner, and you're still talking to me, and you're giving me advice, and I don't need advice. What I need to do is like concentrate on not changing gear while going over a white line and,
right in front of me.
And smashing into a wall like most people did.
So they are now learning
it's a new coaching relationship.
Yeah, the relationship and the dynamics.
And also, just to say, with Formula One, it's a coaching relationship that if it goes wrong, you might crash at 200 kilometers an hour or 300 kilometers an hour. So
some crazy stuff.
Slightly heightened.
The stakes are slightly higher than with juggling. You dropping a prop.
Right. My last part here is what's my notes here? Before a match, game plan. During a match, hype and support.
Yes.
So get what you are going to do in your training session, decide beforehand, and then give yourself the hype, or even imagine the hype and support. Do the positive self-talk, which I struggle with, to be honest, because if I'm getting to the point, I just start shouting at myself like I'm just like, look, fucking just catch the props. The pattern was good. Why aren't you just catching like they were all in your hands? You could just need to catch to it. And then I'll say that, and then I'll turn to someone else training with him and say, I'm sorry, I'm trying to practice positive self-talk, and that was not positive self-talk. But it is one of those things you can do. Like all of these coaching situations is like, learn to be positive and learn to get yourself through the boring bit of the training session if you then want to stick with the training session. Yeah. Like for me as a professional juggler, though, I learned to really enjoy writing down on a blackboard like how many times I dropped. And I would run through routine 10 times in a row. And I was like, oh, I dropped 8 times. Then I dropped 6, and I would get it down to, in 10 times of running through a routine, 3 or 4 drops in 10 run-throughs of a juggling act, I'd be okay with. And then I'm like, I'm ready to go. Yeah. And that's a slog, but just enjoying, like learning to enjoy the process, doing the gamification of like, can I get it on video all the way through without a drop? That's a great moment for a juggling routine, is going all the way through. And if you can get it on video like that, but on video once is just one thing. Like, could you get it on? And that was, if you go back and watch our video of me trying to do the beat train club routine, and I made a vlogs about you there, and I was like, oh yeah, I'll just go. I can do this routine without dropping. And looking back now, I just was using the wrong clubs, and the lighting was a bit off, and I should have used some clubs when I could catch. And there was this one trick where all I had to do was flip it from one end of the club into the other end of the club in a balance, which is something I can do 10 times in a row on stage, but with these clubs, with this moisture in the air or whatever it was, it was just failing. And there's me just going, because I was just wanting to get the routine through clean. And also I hadn't juggled that routine in like a year and a half because of COVID and things. So it is a bit of a weird balance there as well. So let's wrap up here. Parents and family as coaches. Let's use some famous examples. And this is always the question when it comes to tennis coaches and driving coaches and biking coaches and all that other kind of stuff. Is the person who coached Richard Williams, who an Oscar-winning movie about the father of Serena Williams and Venus Williams. Let's say Venus and Serena because they were that way around. Yeah. Is he the greatest is he the greatest tennis coach in the world ever? Because between the two of them, they have like 30 Grand Slams and like 4 gold medals and innumerable doubles titles and stuff. Or did he just happen to be the father of the two of the greatest tennis players of all time?
I think you cannot generalize this.
No, here's the thing.
It's so much about the circumstances.
But let's talk about it. There is this great natural experiment, which we saw with Uncle Tony. Now, is Uncle Tony Nadal, if you don't know, at one point, many points, Nadal was like, maybe at only one point, he was the Grand Slam leader in the men's game. Yeah. 21, 22 Grand Slams or whatever he was up to.
Hugely successful.
14 Roland Garros titles. Won the Olympic gold in doubles and singles or whatever he's done. You know, if you're going to make a list of the greatest tennis players of all time, men and women, Nadal is like definitely top 5, definitely top 10, probably top 5 of all time. Like, there's no way to leave him out of the conversation. You're like, Tony Nadal, how great of a coach is he? Now, he could have been the world's greatest coach of Nadal, who has got a very specific personality, very specific attitude, needs
wants,
left-handed, bare shoulders with his Nike kit on or whatever you need. Like, what does Nadal need? And maybe Tony Nadal was the world's greatest coach. But then he went to coach somebody else. And oh my goodness, it was a train wreck. It was so bad. And it was caught on camera with that other, not Drive to Survive, whatever the tennis drive to, Breakpoint or whatever it is. He's there coaching Felix Auger-Aliassime. And it's just a train wreck, like to the point where it's sort of like, oh yeah, when Rafa would do this, Rafa would do, and I'm like, oh, that's the worst thing.
That's bad.
You can't say this guy who's like, who'd never want to, like, he'd been in like 8 finals without winning a final. Yeah. You can't then talk about what Nadal is like and what Nadal did best when he was a teenager to someone who isn't Nadal. Yeah, and it got even worse when Nadal. Not Tony Nadal, Rafa Nadal, was playing Felix at a Grand Slam. Yeah. And there was a question
I remember that one.
Who Tony Nadal wanted to win. And Tony was like, I actually want my nephew, Rafa Nadal, to beat the person that the player that I'm coaching. And oh my goodness, what a disaster. Like, you can't say that I'm you should be saying I will do everything I possibly can to make sure that you beat my nephew, that you're the one who knocks him out of the Grand Slam and makes
Which would be a huge success also for him.
What we would all say that Tony Nadal was the world's greatest coach because he coached Nadal to however many Grand Slams, many Grand Slams, and then he went over and he coached someone to beat his own, like, everyone would be like, well, he had the inside information, he knew what to do, but he didn't. He was actually open about the fact that he wanted his nephew to win rather than his coaching client to win. And it's so insanely bad. And you realize that Tony Nadal is a terrible coach for anyone who isn't his own nephew. Like, he had no authority there. His only authority was based on Nadal. Like, Nadal would have had the authority to do that. And, Nadal got in a new coach, Carlos Moya, who was himself a number 1 player and a Grand Slam champion or whatever like that. Exactly who he needed. You need that kind of super coach at that point. Like, you've already done everything. What are you going to do? And so it's this great kind of like Yeah, it's a great natural experiment that we actually have someone who was this coach, went somewhere else and was a disaster.
Yeah. And I think this is now one of the important things about being a coach, a trainer, or any person who is working for somebody.
Yeah.
Is that you need to focus so much on what that person needs to do to improve. You cannot insert yourself too much. Like, no, sure, now and then here and there show something like that they can then aspire to achieve, but not, you can't sit there and say, look, I'm doing it like this. You now just need to do it like that.
Yeah, there's this famous story. Sorry.
Let me just finish.
Oh, okay.
And then the other one is exactly what happened here. Yeah. You cannot use other people as a comparison to what that person, your student, your client needs to be like.
Yeah.
That is like, these are such wrong things to do as a coach.
Yeah.
You need to take yourself back and you need to have everybody else back. The important thing is to have that person in front of you improve and improve in the ways that they need.
Yeah, it's one of these weird things. The balance with this thing is that you, especially with like a super coach, or if you're wanting in juggling worlds, you go to a masterclass.
Yeah.
The reason you go into a masterclass is because you respect them so much and their achievements. Mm-hmm. You're respecting their capabilities and their history and their past achievements.
Yeah.
If it's on the tennis side or the driving side or the biking, I'm into mountain biking, so I listen to podcasts and people talking about coaching on there.
And the same in the singing. You go, like, there's singing masterclasses. You go to the famous singers but
at the same time, if it's a one-on-one relationship, that person also has to have zero ego. The coach has to have zero ego, or like they have to be doing it not for their own ego, because otherwise the other person won't be successful at all.
Yeah.
And there's this famous story of, I think it was, I might be getting the names mixed up, but it was like someone like Glenn Hoddle, who was a great footballer who was then coaching England, and David Beckham. And David Beckham wanted some advice, and Glenn Hoddle's like, oh, just put it in the back of the net like this. And he just did like a perfect free kick curving into the, and you're like, oh, you can't learn anyone who is like, do what I did. And there's an example in the juggling world. Do I want to mention it? Yeah, I might as well. There was this juggler called Kit Summers.
Okay.
Is a juggler. Was a juggler. Difficult to say because he was a good juggler, high-level juggler.
Yeah.
And then he was like hit by a car or was in some kind of accident.
Oh, bad.
And then,
terrible.
like really bad. And then had to relearn juggling.
Oh.
And I spoke to somebody, I think, or I read about somebody who had gone to one of his masterclasses and they were really disappointed because so much of what he said was like, oh yeah, I used to be able to do this. Like so much of it was like really, it was like, you say it was really sad that so much of it was like, oh, I used to be able to do this. And then who was asking advice, it was sort of like, well, I used to do it like this, but then couldn't prove it. And you shouldn't have to prove it. Like if I'm talking about stuff, I shouldn't have to prove what I've done in the past for people to respect what I say if I'm teaching them about juggling or teaching them about performing or giving them a masterclass or doing them a workshop. People who come along there, I want them to already believe that if I'm giving them advice, it's from a position of authority. And this juggler who went to this masterclass with Kit Summers was like unhappy with how Kit Summers was portraying that he was someone they could have confidence in when all of the examples were, I used to be able to do this.
So by doing that, he's undermining his own authority.
Yeah. And so I'm not blaming him for him doing that. I'm not blaming him for being a bad coach. And I'm not blaming the person going along, because the person going along there might want to, and this is what I'm saying about Marcelo, who was this acrobatics teacher. He made it very clear up front, I'm not going to demonstrate anything. I don't have anything to prove to you. You're paying me to be here and taking this course. You're in my acrobatics studio with me as your teacher. And he made it very clear what his position of authority was there. And I think if you're doing a masterclass or one-on-one training, that level of authority already has to be there.
Yeah.
And oh my goodness, Tony Nadal dropped the ball big time on that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be someone better. Like, again, Djokovic getting Andy Murray as his coach. They were rivals. They couldn't be friends. And now they're working together. And Andy Murray was very successful in getting Djokovic to beat Alcaraz, which he didn't do last year.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't do in the Grand Slams last year. He did this year. So it's this really weird balance. Like, you need someone that you respect, but then you have to respect them so much that if they tell you something, you have to respect that they're not saying that out of ego or to prove anything. Yeah. Very tricky balance.
And I think this is the really difficult thing about coaches. You can have different style of coaches. You can have a coach that was very successful themselves.
Yeah.
And you as a student want to go there and look at what they do to get something out of that for yourself. or you go to a coach that might not even be that successful in their own they do, but they are good at telling other people to improve.
And that's the best tennis coaches are the ones who don't have to. They've had multiple people, like a Darren Cahill, who's coached 4 people to the world number 1.
Yeah.
And like most recently, Yannick Sinner, before that, Simona Halep, before that, I can't remember the other people as well, like he did.
Yeah.
Leighton Hewitt, I know. But like he's coached multiple people to Grand Slam success and number 1 rankings. And you're like, right. So whatever's he doing, he's doing that correctly. And other coaches are good at what they do. I remember actually with, again, I'm talking a lot about tennis here, but it's the one where the
one-on-one.
It's the one where the personality of the coach and the fact of a coach is so out there. It's like so prominent, like underneath the in the listings of the tennis player, they always say who is the coach, like on the Wikipedia page, who is the current coach. Someone like Danny Valverdue, who was Andy Murray's coach for a while, he went over to coach 2 different people, and both of them he immediately coached to their highest ever rankings, and they only didn't get higher rankings because they had to go up against like Djokovic and Murray and Nadal and Federer, but he immediately coached 2 other people to their highest ever rankings, and you're like, okay, so he's not very, he wouldn't be seen as a successful coach because he didn't get someone to a number 1 or a Grand Slam, and you're like, he didn't happen to be the father or uncle of one of the greatest tennis players or 2 of the greatest tennis players of all time. But he put something in there. So
I just from my own experience from coming from the singing world is that I always think that a person who is a great teacher and a great coach, a great trainer, is a person where their students are succeeding themselves in the level of what they are doing, what the success that the students should be in the thing that they're doing, be more successful than the teacher.
No, I wouldn't say that.
No, maybe
and
not quite like that.
Up with
Let me
2 examples.
I
where
just
that's not
said
the case.
something slightly wrong than I wanted to say. So what I think is that the teacher should always aspire that the students at some point succeed themselves so that they can move on to somebody else.
I see what you mean.
And then the other thing is that you need to look for the things that you want out of that coaching and training and teaching. If you are going to a masterclass where somebody is good at performing and has a huge career in the field that you are going to, then you can ask them questions about all the background, all the theater things, the things that nobody tells you unless you are already in it. Like the being on time in the rehearsals.
Doing another different kind of coaching as well.
The different kind of coaching, the performance aspect and the actual doing the thing aspect is a different kind of coaching from a person that gets you to that level. I think.
So to finish off with, I've mentioned some different family members of coaching. Was it talking about Jos Verstappen?
Yes.
Jos Verstappen. Max Verstappen's father, obviously an amazing coach. Whatever he did it right. But you were like, it doesn't sound healthy. And that's the other thing as well. Unhealthy parent, child, coach, student relationships.
It's difficult.
All over the place, and especially in tennis. You see Tsitsipas and Zverev and these other kind of family-based ones. It can work out really well. Again, you can have like a Richard Williams or whoever Caroline Wozniacki's father, who coached them. Like Caroline Wozniacki was coached for her entire career by her father, and it seemed to work out fine. Again, Grand Slam winner, world number 1.
It is difficult to have it so close because I think the parents should be the safe space, the safe place for children. And if you are the coach for something specific, you need to know where this is coming from. Is this coming from you as the parent? Is this coming purely from the child's enjoyment, or are they doing it to please you? And that is a difficult edge. Well, because if they are doing it and they're putting in the hard work and they are like on the edge of not having a childhood to enjoy because you are putting so much pressure on them to please you and to make you happy as the parent, that is really tricky, really difficult. But if if it becomes like a relationship of, yay, let's do this together.
Yeah.
And we are having fun until like to know your child and to know what they need, to give them the support. That is like,
you have totally spoiled the thing that I was going to say.
Oh, I'm
no,
so
it's
sorry.
good. Let's two contrasting juggling coaches.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Nick Gatto. Coaches up a child prodigy. Great. Anthony Gatto retires when he's 39 years old.
Yeah.
With a busted shoulder and not loving juggling and just falling out of love with juggling and
Yeah.
giving away his props to other people and like not being like completely disconnected from the
Severing
juggling
tie.
scene.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Now let's talk about the Cremo family, Bella Cremo.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Obviously taught his son his own act, set him up for life as a professional performer.
In the 70s.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
Chris Cremo never gave up. He's been a professional performer and now he's like 74 years old or whatever he is.
Still performing.
And he's still performing. His
that
son,
same act, isn't
the
it?
same act, yeah, of course. And that's what I say, setting up for life. Like, of course, Bella Cremo is like the best juggling coach because he is all of the respect. He's professional. Every single thing that he's teaching his son is something that he's doing. Like the technique of Chris Cremo is flawless. He, did better. He did more pirouettes under the whatever he's doing under the things.
Yeah.
Got better at the hats and everything like that. Whatever training environment. Again, you can just say, "Oh, it's just a parent." Like, no, that must have been a really interesting coaching relationship, which I've not talked to Chris Cremo about. But Chris Cremo happily goes to other juggling conventions. I've met him at a convention. He was doing workshops there. He was at the play festival that we went to in 2019. Yeah, Halle convention. He's still, tangentially connected to the juggling world, but still happy to share tricks, do workshops, do everything he wants. Like he's not doing master classes where you got to pay extra to do a workshop with him at the convention and things like that. Completely different from Anthony Gatto. Yeah. And obviously now learned enough that I met him for the first time in 2006 at the Irish EJC, Mill Street EJC. And he was performing there. I think I was performing. I was organizing. I was maybe doing the shows or whatever. I was talking to him and his son was there and his son was like 5 years old at the time or 6 years old and his son not interested in juggling at all. Obviously Chris Kramer hadn't said, you're 3 years old, you're 4 years old, you're 5 years old, now pick up these juggling balls and now do these hats
you
and
need
cigar
to continue the legacy.
Well, he did. He was invited to a juggling convention, took his son along there. His son was suddenly into juggling. He's like, he wasn't into juggling before and now he's into juggling. So that was actually, it wasn't the first time I met Chris Kramer, but that's the first time I did a workshop with him and seen him perform and stuff like that. And now they're in Berlin, or they were last season in the autumn. Yeah, the two of them, him and his son, can't remember his son's name now. Then the third, fourth, I don't know how many generations of Kramer is there, but doing the same routine, the same tricks, setting him up like, oh, you want to be a professional juggler, start training? Yeah, you just take my name, go on with it. And I don't know how much pressure was there or whatever it was there, but I don't know. It just seems like that
seems more like a healthy.
Well, I think they also just learned from coming from a circus family, being around circus people and knowing what it is like to grow up as a circus person. And Chris Kramer is obviously like, well, no pressure on my end. And then his son goes off to university, and only when he finished university and he comes into again, I don't know the full story there because it's like just seeing it from afar, seeing Anthony Gatto from afar, and seeing Chris Kramer and his family and coaching situation. So there's different things to look at there. It's so weird. I was looking at this, like trying to find this footage of Anthony Gatto juggling 8 clubs, and there's some from the official, his training video to be the best video where he was like got someone in, and then there's also just some stuff from the IJA festival video, and he's just there. And what an attitude. You can either say, what a healthy attitude that you have there to become the world's best juggler. But also you could look at him and go, what an attitude. He's never had to pick up his props before. And he's just doing there and loads of people sitting around. And you're like, oh man, there's like definitely a balance to strike there.
Yeah, it always is.
What is there? Like, and that's the thing where the kind of balance to be struck between, are you the best in the world at what you do? And is your confidence justified? That's really good. But then it can go over to arrogance. It can go over to, unpleasant personality. And you can, I always like to think, well, it's not always like to think. It always seems like from the outside that some of the people who are the best in the world at something are kind of slightly broken inside, and you have to be that a little bit broken. But I don't think that's true with juggling because the competition isn't strong enough. There's only a few people who are like become broken people and disconnected and fall out of love from juggling who are also the best in the world, like Anthony Gatto, a few of these child prodigies, and the healthy ones, they just go and become computer programmers or musicians or whatever they do, and they're no longer the best juggler in their country or of their generation, because it just doesn't matter to them enough, and they've got other options.
Yeah.
And it's so
like
weird.
Vova Galchenko.
Yeah, like a Vova Galchenko. Oh, yeah, he's now like a tech guy, and Olga is a tech, and also working in Silicon Valley. It's all like their real coach was Mark Bacalor and Barry Bacalor, who were the tech millionaires who own the mansion that they're juggling in, and less so Jason Garfield. Like, whose footsteps are you going to follow? The tech billionaire, or the tech millionaire, or whatever it is, or the guy over there pretending not to be a clown who's actually a clown?
Yeah.
It's like. Yeah, it's like, which way do you go? No offense to Jason Garfield. I mean, he's a great juggler and probably a really good coach and things like that. But like the environment that Vova and Olga was in was tech millionaire coach. Their environment that was really rubbing off of them was like, get your maths degree and then go and become
I guess at some point they just lost the desire and the love to pursue this. And this is to make a decision to not do it.
As teenagers, they got to be some of the best jugglers in the world.
Yeah.
They got the world records, they won the competitions, and it's like, to move on, to get to that next stage, you need to really want it, and you need to want to go to circus school rather than going to computer science school.
And I think it can lead to then, for them, looking back at it, remembering it fondly as that was a great era of my life.
I only know this looking from the outside.
And that is healthier than sticking to something because of outside pressure, then destroying your body and your health. Because if you overdo something that you're not really that your body is telling you that's not really your thing, and you keep doing it for whatever reasons, that can have a huge impression on everything that's been good in the past.
Yeah, and to be really clear, I think Nick Gatto was the world's greatest juggling coach because he had someone he could mold, and he was already a professional coach. He was a gymnastics coach, he was a boxing coach, so he just brought in everything he knew from being a professional coach in one or two areas, and you can apply it to juggling world. And I think that's what you can do. Like, a lot of my examples have come from, in this podcast, from tennis, because the coaching is like
and other
they're always
areas,
showing the coach. They always someone does something cool, the tennis player celebrates, and then they show the reaction from the coach. That happens in football as well. At the end of the match, you will see the coaches, the managers, like shaking hands with each other. So, and you don't get that from juggling. So a lot of the examples from professional sports world, but I do think there's lessons to be learned. And I think the biggest lessons are like, what if I was a professional tennis player, what would the coach be doing? Would they be hyping me up through my practice session? They'll give me a training plan, and then during me executing that plan, like if you want to say a training session is like a tennis match or whatever, then they're there for hype. So positive self-talk, hype, make a plan, and then make everything about it as easy and as pleasant for yourself so you enjoy the slog as much as possible, because training and drilling technique can be a slog, but if you make that fun, you put on the right music, or you don't put on the music, you juggle with other people, or you don't juggle with other people, you need the encouragement, or you need someone to shout at you, whatever you need, try and accomplish that as yourself. And also listen to other people around you. Like Juliana gives me some advice. She gives me advice all the time, which like 50% of the time is good advice, 50% of the time is bad advice, but I never know until I try it. And because I try it, 50% of the time I get benefit out of it, and 50% of the time I get no negative benefit out of it because I just move on. So it's Juliana is a great coach.
Oh, thank you.
I'm just saying, it helps. Because again, the 50% of the time it doesn't help, it doesn't not help. So I'm just taking the 50% of the time when it does help.
And I think one other thing that people should really know is that we are past the time in history and where people are thinking is that you need one person that does it all. Take this out of your brain. You need to look for the specialists. You need to look for, okay, where can I specifically improve? Can I just go to a person that really helps with my mental, like how I think about something? Do I need to go to a person that is really a good physiotherapist who gives me really good tips to align my body in the right way? Do I need somebody who does my administration. That I know it's so underrated. Or like, do I, in your case, have an agent that does all that? Is in a way
the division of labor.
Something that you need to not worry about. You just turn up and you do your thing, and that
but that's what I'm saying. The division of labor, you can do all the labor yourself, but when you're in the training session, when you're actually wanting to get the trick for the first time or improve a juggling act, division of labor, at that point, you're no longer doing the planning. You're no longer doing the administration, all that kind of stuff. So, I think that's everything I need to say.
Yeah.
Be your own Nick Gatto.
Yeah.
And be your own Darren Cahill. And be your own whoever the other super coaches are.
Yeah.
The whoever you need to be.
Yeah. And also it might need some time for you to figure out what you need.
Oh, yeah. Again, all of this comes with time and comes with experience. And also, if you're still at the level where you're a teenager and you've just got unlimited time and space and a nice training space, you don't need to worry about this. This is all for people.
Just go do what's fun.
Yeah, this is all for people who are in their 20s and are wanting to improve skills or wanting to get better to be on stage or to improve in different things. Again, and also, I guess importantly is work out what you don't need to do. Now, here's the thing. I really like mountain biking and riding my bike, any kind of biking, but I really enjoy mountain biking.
Yeah.
And I've made a very clear decision that I don't want to get good at mountain biking tricks or techniques beyond just enjoying riding.
Yeah.
And I started doing this. I was like, I'll learn how to do a wheelie, or I'll learn how to do a manual, or I'll learn how to do a bunny hop and all. And I very soon worked out, I was like, oh no, I actually need to not do this. Biking for me needs to be a break from learning how to do something. This is purely about enjoying going downhill fast and safely and riding up hills as hard as possible and just general fitness and enjoying riding and sightseeing and bike rides with Juliana and all the fun stuff. I want everything fun about juggling. And any time that I'm wanting to technically think things through or to improve myself physically or improve engineering or improve any of this kind of stuff, I need to just put that out of my mind. I'm just going to pay money for the bike. I'm going to just enjoy riding it. You know, I am all the time improving my technique at the things which I enjoy doing, which is technical riding and going around corners and going off rocks and the technical side of stuff. And I have zero interest in getting better at jumping and bunny hopping and manualing and all the tricks as well. So decide what you don't want to get good at.
Yeah.
Like decide where you want to focus. Like, I'm going to get good at these things and I'm not going to try and get good at everything. No. A coach will get you good to improve the things either that you're good at to become world class at it, or to bolster the things that you're not very good at to support the thing that you're already good at.
Yeah.
There should be I'm going to completely change direction and become a bounce juggler. It's like, no, don't. No, that isn't what you should be doing right now. And I've discovered that many times of all the different bounce juggling routines that I've come up with. I'm like, now I'm going to do this. I'm like, you're never going to have a world-class bounce juggling routine. You can have a filler in your show, which is going to be bouncing.
Yeah.
But don't keep trying to become a world-class bounce juggler. That you missed your window 20 years ago, Luke, specifically. All right, then. That's it. I keep saying that's it, but that now is it. We've gone for an hour and a half on this. Good topic, though.
Yeah,
big topic.
Very good topic. Something I think
I might put in the description. We're going to say how to apply lessons of coaching to you, even if you don't have a coach. Maybe I'll put that in the description so I get to it more than 30 minutes into the podcast. Yeah. Also, people understand what the plan is more than 30 minutes in. So maybe the title of this podcast will be how to get the benefits of a juggling coach without a juggling coach.
How to become your own coach.
How to become your own juggling coach. Yeah. Or guides to being your own. Better your juggling by being your own juggling coach. We'll come up with a good title or subtitle.
Yes.
Right, that's it from us. Thanks a lot to our Patreon supporters again. Go to patreon.com/Luke Burridge to support us here. Yeah. I forgot to actually mention the thing before when we were talking about Patreon, the website. I forgot to mention the URL. Either way, do that. Thank you very much to all our supporters. Thanks a lot for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Goodbye.